Part 52. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 511. Su Ming doesn't have the time to do this process. Even if he has the patience and spends several years training all the animals one by one, 80% of them will not pass the demonstration in the end. Director Su, if you insist on doing this, we as outsiders cannot forcibly stop it. But we will stay in Yangchuan City for a while to collect various data after the release. A university professor who has the same academic status as Professor Chu said solemnly, large-scale release is a good thing, and even small-scale failures and deaths can be tolerated, but if the failure data exceeds a certain proportion, we will write to the government and apply for an administrative order to terminate the release, and even initiate accountability. What do you think? Yes, Director Su, although we cannot interfere with your work, we are all engaged in animal research and protection. We cannot watch a large number of animals that should be protected die. The other experts nodded and agreed with the professor's opinion. Looking at their expressions, they have already determined that the release will inevitably fail. They look gloomy and miserable. Looking at Su Ming's eyes, they are full of regrets. Perhaps in their eyes, Su Ming was a young man who had achieved success at a young age and was overwhelmed by the various honors he had suddenly received. He wanted to release animals into the wild to shock the world again. Su Ming could understand their feelings. If he were in their place, he would have the same idea. Releasing hundreds of animals at one time was a blast for laymen, but it was completely nonsense for experts. Experts, welcome to stay in Yangchuan City. I hope this release can provide some experience for future animal research. Su Ming smiled, without explaining anything or arguing. The advantage of superpowers is that as long as you don't say anything, others will never be able to figure out the reason. If the release is a great success, these highly educated intellectuals will find ways to explain it from a scientific perspective. After a busy week, the release of animals into the wild at the zoo finally began. At the edge of the back mountain, 100 meters below the hillside where Guyuzianju is located, there is an open area of several acres. Dear viewers, this is Yangchuan TV station. I am broadcasting the release of animals into the wild at Yangchuan Zoo. It is reported that the scale of this release of animals into the wild at Yangchuan Zoo is the largest since the founding of the People's Republic of China. Experts from several agricultural universities and the Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences participated in this release. The scene turned and a row of old experts' faces appeared. Their faces were livid. If they were not in front of the TV camera, these old experts would have wanted to curse. The host's words were reserved. This release of animals into the wild was not only the largest since the founding of the People's Republic of China, but also the largest since the establishment of zoos in the world. Not far away, more than 900 animals of various types were locked up in more than 100 cages of various sizes. The old experts only knew that the number of animals released into the wild was large, but no one expected that it would be carried out at the same time and place. It was nonsense before, and now it is purely whimsical. What is the difference between such an unplanned release of animals into the wild and those so-called good men and women who randomly release fish and turtles? The experts were holding back their anger and did not look good to the camera and Su Ming. There was also a large group of tourists who were playing in the zoo. They came from all over the park to watch the excitement. So Su Ming made another decision that surprised everyone. He ordered the security guards not to stop these tourists. All tourists could get close to the cages and have close contact with the animals. Experts look at problems from a professional perspective, while these non-professional tourists rely on their own intuitive feelings. Dad, look, this little deer is nodding at me, the little girl in a floral dress lay on the cage and said in surprise. Because it knows that you are going to give it freedom, so the little deer is very grateful to you. The father smiled and rubbed his daughter's head, weaving a white lie for her. As an adult, the father certainly knew that the little deer could not know what was going to happen next, and would not thank his daughter for what was going to happen next. Yes, the little girl nodded vigorously, holding a long leaf and passing it to the little deer's mouth through the gap in the cage. Little deer, I also hate being locked in the room all the time. Don't worry, eat something first, and you will be able to come out in a while. The little deer in the cage did not eat the leaves. As if it could understand what the little girl said, it curled up its limbs and lay down, and docilely put its head to the side of the cage, and touched the little girl's hand with its antlers. Similar scenes almost happened in front of each cage. Those animals with different temperaments were surprisingly quiet at this time. None of them made any noises or roars, and they didn't even show any fear. They just stayed in the cage quietly, without making any sound, and waited silently. Dear audience friends, you are not at the scene, and you may not be able to feel the atmosphere in front of you. Being in the situation, I was suddenly moved, as if I was about to witness the rebirth of hundreds of lives, the TV host said slowly in a sensational tone. In the silence, Su Ming's voice rang out from the loudspeaker, "Now we are going to release the animals into the wild. Dear tourists, please open the latches on the cages beside you and let these animals return to the embrace of nature." Letting ordinary tourists release the animals into the wild, the experts rolled their eyes, and had become numb to Su Ming's unconventional approach. The tourists then noticed that each cage was not locked, but only locked with a latch. With a slight push, the cage could be opened. There was a brief silence in the audience. The tourists hesitated. Should they do as Su Ming said? Although there were no tigers or lions in the cage, no one could guarantee absolute safety. Foxes, eagles, and even deer with horns could cause considerable harm to people if they went crazy. Click. A light sound was very clear in the silence. The little girl in the flowery dress had pulled the latch. The little deer tentatively raised the horns on its head and pushed the cage. The cage creaked open. "Be careful." Dad stared at the little deer, which was a circle larger than the little girl, vigilantly. The little deer walked out of the cage and looked around blankly. "Little deer, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you." The little girl was not afraid of the little deer at all. She flashed out from behind her father, stretched out her little hand and touched the little deer's head with a smile. The little deer tilted its head and rubbed its neck against the little girl's face for a few times, but stopped where it was, seeming a little at a loss. The little girl pointed to the distant forest and said seriously, "Little deer, go back to nature." After that, she patted the little deer's butt gently. The little deer was brave, stepped on all fours, and walked towards the back mountain. Every few steps, he looked back at the little girl. "Don't be afraid. Be brave. Go." The little girl covered her mouth with her hands to form a big trumpet, and said to the little deer in a childish voice. In the eyes of everyone, the little deer made a deer cry, let go of the pace, and ran towards the back mountain. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 512. In silence, the sound of a deer calling opened the curtain of the release. Cages were constantly opened, and the various animals in them did not hurt the tourists who opened the cages. Some animals who loved their own people even expressed their affection for humans with body language. A large group of animals, at this time, showed a completely different spirit from usual, and ran to the back mountain as if they had been reborn. More than 900 animals, in less than an hour, all escaped from their cages, completed the release, and returned to the wildlife in the back mountain. There were calls one after another in the back mountain, and dozens of animals expressed their inner joy with different sounds. 10,000 animals galloping to freedom. Yangchuan City TV station added a striking title for this release in the replay that night. The release was also discussed in forums and Weibo. For most ordinary people, they don't think too much about professional technical issues. What they see is the joy and excitement of animals after leaving the cage. This has kept the experts who are always worried busy. Nonsense, just nonsense. The more support there was online, the more the experts felt that Su Ming was using the safety of animals to attract attention. However, they had no time to blame Su Ming now. All the experts, including Professor Chu, went into the back mountain to observe the living conditions of the released animals. Many roads have been built in the back mountain, and you can drive in, but most places are still undeveloped wilderness, and you can only walk on foot. At the beginning, Su Ming actually had the mentality of watching the show, thinking that I was doing something, and you were complaining, you deserved to be exhausted. But after a few days, he felt that his attitude was a bit extreme. Although these old experts questioned him, it was not out of personal conflict, but for the real cause of animal protection. This can be seen from their work attitude. With their status and level in the academic world, at such an old age, there is no need to do everything personally. But these old experts, including Professor Chu, all plunged into the deep mountains and old forests. Some of them did not come out for several days. Occasionally, some individuals returned to replenish supplies and replace equipment. After replenishing, they did not stop at all and plunged into the mountains without stopping. In order to prevent getting lost, each small team led by an expert carried a positioning device with them. From the monitoring, some of those experts stayed at a fixed point for several days in a row, some ran around hundreds of miles in the mountains within a few days. The farthest one even left the scope of the zoo's back mountain in the general sense, deep into the Kinling Mountains, and the straight line distance from the zoo was nearly 100 kilometers. A week passed, and various data were constantly sent back from the mountains, but no expert left. Su Ming always thought that he was dedicated and hard-working enough at work, but when compared with these old experts, he suddenly found that his previous cognition was really naive. Young people, especially those who have achieved something like him, always find it easy to feel that the older generation is out of date, not up to date at all, and far inferior to themselves. Sometimes they even secretly despise them in their hearts. However, after really getting in touch with their work, they found that the older generation may be out of date in technology, but they have a quality in their bones that the current young people, including themselves, do not have. In our era, this is called romantic revolutionary sentiment. Director Song said a word that sounds funny, but his tone is definitely not a joke. The romantic sentiment of the older generation is not about love, flowers, snow, and moon, but under the most difficult conditions, even in desperate situations, they firmly believe that their careers will succeed and make unremitting efforts for it. So from the second week, Su Ming also joined the team of old experts. As the parties involved, Yangchuan City Zoo and Su Ming could not participate in data collection. Su Ming took a helicopter every day, acting as the captain of the transportation team, sending the best supplies to each point and team, and providing all possible conveniences. The data collection work after the release lasted for a whole month and was finally completed. Director Su, we wrongly blamed you before. At the summary meeting, a group of experts looked very weathered. The old professor of the agricultural university nodded to Su Ming and apologized, and then announced the results of the investigation on the release. During the one-month investigation, 12 experts led 9 teams and observed more than 500 animals in total, accounting for more than 60% of the total number of animals released into the wild. No animal died due to not adapting to the wild environment. The living area of most animals is concentrated within a range of 20 kilometers in the back mountain, which ensures that they will not encounter wild beasts. In the case of insufficient food, they can also get some supplements from the zoo, so they have time to adapt. This made the experts very puzzled at first. Do animals have a homesick plot, so they all gather around the zoo? The subsequent observation conclusion explained this question. Before releasing the animals into the wild, the zoo had done a lot of preparation work. More than 100 dogs rescued one after another, led by a wolf that was released into the wild the earliest, were like a group of shepherds, guiding other animals that came later. In addition, the Love people in the back mountain also made great contributions. When in Iraq, the Love people lived in the mountains and had rich experience in dealing with animals. They would not interfere with the lives of animals, but could act as temporary keepers and protectors. They even caught several poachers in the mountains who wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to enter the mountains to make money. It turns out that the Yangchuan Zoo had made full preparations before releasing the animals into the wild, and these preparations were completely different from those in the textbooks we are familiar with, and are very valuable for research. The old professor of the Academy of Agricultural Sciences said to Su Ming, "Director Su, I have an unwelcome request." After working together for a period of time, the two sides no longer had the mutual distrust at the beginning, and established a kind of mutual appreciation. Su Ming nodded, "Please tell me, I will try my best to meet your request. It's like this, we want to compile the experience of this release into a textbook, and then popularize it among students of related majors and zoos across the country. However, we are at most compilers, and our experience still comes from your zoo, so I hope to get your authorization," said the old professor. Su Ming was stunned. "If that's the case, wouldn't I also be an expert?" "Of course, your professional level in the wild release work is obvious to all," the old professor said. "No problem, if there is anything you need to know, Yangchuan City Zoo will cooperate 100%, Su Ming nodded. "However, I am probably an expert, and I am really an expert. The real experience of Yangchuan City Zoo is not replaceable. If I popularize it according to this task, I am afraid it will mislead the students. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 513. The ancients said that meritorious service and words and virtue are the three major events in life. Su Ming was involved in almost three major events. Merit is a career. A few companies plus a zoo can barely be considered a small career. Judging from his age, he is definitely a successful person. In terms of morality, he has a lot of honors on his fingers. The highest, he has become a national representative, just like Buddha, with a big halo behind his head. Carrying out animal protection work is inherently a virtuous thing. In the past, he was still short of making a statement, but now the expert team has helped him handle this matter. Several old experts have written a book based on this wild operation to summarize their experiences and lessons. Regarding this book, Su Ming often sighed with regret. "I am still too naive, too kind, and too generous. There are royalties for publishing books, which is about 8% of the book price. The old experts are the editors, and Su Ming and the zoo are the source of the content of this book. At the beginning, the experts discussed the topic and the final royalties were half and half with the zoo." Su Ming thought to himself, how much money can you make from publishing a book? So he pretended to be generous and made a favor without asking for royalties, saying that everything would be donated to the cause of animal protection. After a long time, he deeply regretted his original decision. Although the royalties were very low as a textbook, he couldn't handle the large volume. Back then I was pretending to be generous and made a lot of money less. But that's another story. Now that the zoo has released them into the wild, the enclosures are finally barely enough. After a little renovation and a small amount of money, all the animals brought back from Iraq found new homes. These guys lived like pure refugees in Iraq. They were hungry every meal. Oh no, they were almost never full. They were hungry and thirsty all year round. Even the animals in the National Zoo in Baghdad and the ones that were later given away by the hotel, the big gap-toothed hippopotamus is very hungry and is said to be fed only one meal a day. For these animals, Yangchuan Zoo is a paradise. They have several meals a day, enough to eat and drink, and even have special nutrition. There is a doctor when they get sick, and they don't have to worry about being caught by the soldiers at any time to make barbecue ingredients. Their lives are not to mention moist, and they have never been in this life. I never thought there would be such a day. Animals also have emotions, and have their own joys, anger, sorrows, and joys. Moreover, these guys are not as deep-set as humans. They do not hide their emotions at all and will directly reflect their inner feelings. Hippopotamuses smiling with their mouths wide open, lions basking on the grass like big dogs after eating, giraffes strolling leisurely on the grass, and platypuses sticking their butts out in the water and burrowing up and down to vomit water. Two big rhinos rolling around in the mud. All the animals in the zoo give people a feeling of joy. When tourists walk in the zoo, they are inexplicably infected and feel very happy. Of course, not everything is as expected, and there are still some problems. Mainly because the food conditions at the zoo are so good. As the old saying goes, it is easy to go from frugality to luxury, but it is actually wrong. They are used to living a miserable life. The animals from Iraq don't have 2 ounces of oil in their stomachs. Suddenly, their stomachs can't accept the sudden increase in fish and meat. After a week, many animals showed varying degrees of discomfort, including diarrhea, indigestion, and gastrointestinal accumulation. The most exaggerated thing was the little koala. Su Ming didn't have time to play with it, so he gave it to Nangong Huang. Male Hong Huang acted like a monkey, hanging it on his body all day long and playing with it everywhere. That day, as soon as the koala climbed onto Nangong Huang's head, he suddenly vomited all over his face. Then he lay there motionless with an attitude of "I'm going to die soon." Nangong Huang was startled, thinking that the koala was really going to die, so he quickly found the veterinarian. After the veterinarian checked, he found that the little guy had just eaten too much. For these foreign bumpkins and the remaining native creatures in the zoo, there is only 2 words: contempt. What a bunch of guys from the countryside. The local gray wolf family looked down upon their new neighbors. The house next door to them used to be Miss Red Fox's home. Miss Red Fox went wild to the back mountains and followed a group of dogs around all day long. The cage was emptied, leaving a group of hyenas from her hometown in the prairie. It doesn't matter that these guys are ugly, but they look particularly ugly when they eat. Have you never eaten meat before? Look at how stingy they are. On a hot day, the meat is smelly, and they still hide it like a treasure under the haystack in the innermost part of the cage. The food in the zoo is sufficient. After a few days, a lot of uneaten meat accumulated next door, not to mention the smell. Although Miss Red Fox was a bit bad-tempered when she was here, how could she be so petty? In fact, when the Wolf King was young in the wild, if he was extremely hungry, he would eat carrion. But those days have long gone like a river, never to come back. I live a pampered life, but I can't stand the gang of hyenas next door. They have made the environment so bad, and let people, oh no, let the wolf live? So every day a group of wolves had a new routine. Under the leadership of the Wolf King, they bared their teeth at the hyenas next door to scare them. The hyenas had just arrived, and their numbers were not yet dominant. In addition, they were born to rely on group fights to strengthen their courage. They dared not fight with the wolves, but they were reluctant to throw out the smelly meat for fear that one day they would live a precarious and hungry life again. He could only hide in the cage and carefully protect the leftover meat. The smell of rotten meat became stronger and stronger, causing passing tourists to cover their noses and flee. Flies buzzed in and out of the cages, forming a small dark cloud. Master Peng, the administrator in charge of this area, couldn't stand it anymore, so he personally entered the hyena's cage and cleaned up the pile of rotten meat. When Master Peng, wearing big rubber shoes and a mask, shoveled away their treasures, the hyenas were so sad that they lay on the ground and whimpered, with pitiful eyes, almost crying. The big bad wolf was unhappy, and the grizzly bear family was also very angry recently. The Bear Mountain where the 3 of them originally lived was very large, with rockery, pools, and small woods. If you look at it from a human perspective, it is almost equivalent to a family of 3 living in a single-family villa with a large yard and a swimming pool. But now, there are new members in the family, 2 Malayan bears. The Malayan bear is the smallest of the bears. At most, it can only grow to 1 meter and stick out its head. It weighs more than 100 kilograms, with black fur and a big yellowish nose. The teddy bear doll is designed based on the Malayan bear. It can be seen that although it has the word bear in its name, the Malayan bear is not fierce at all, but rather cute. The 2 Malayan bears came from the Baghdad National Zoo. One weighs more than 40 kilograms, and the other weighs only more than 30 kilograms. They are thin and small. When they first arrived here, they were so hungry that they were skin and bones, and they didn't look like bears at all. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 514. 2 more bears moved into the big house, squeezing out the living space for no reason. The grizzly family was of course unhappy. No one would be unhappy about this, let alone animals with a strong sense of territory. The 2 sides did not get along well. In front of the grizzly family of 3, the 2 skinny Malayan bears were like dwarfs standing in front of giants. They had no ability to resist at all. The grizzly bears didn't even need their parents to do anything. The little grizzly bears could slap the 2 guys to the wall and hang them. Animals are similar to humans. Those with big bodies and strong strength like to make trouble and bully people. On the contrary, skinny guys are relatively more honest. Malayan bears are like this. They don't grow up. Their temperament is much more gentle than that of grizzly bears. They usually eat mainly vegetarian food and occasionally eat birds. In theory, it is most suitable for them to live with pandas. But after the panda Lele got pregnant, she became very sensitive. If something went wrong, Lele would start to lose her temper. Even Yingying didn't dare to take the initiative to provoke her. No one in the entire zoo dared to offend this pregnant woman of national treasure level. If these 2 Malay bears lived in the panda house, who knows how Lele would get angry again, so they could only squeeze in with their other close relatives, the grizzly bears, for the time being. Su Ming certainly couldn't watch the 2 little Malay bears being beaten into bear mud. Before moving in, he deliberately told the grizzly bear family not to bully the 2 little guys. The little grizzly bear was cunning and said 10,000 OKs in front of Su Ming, and stretched out his paw to pat the 2 little Malay bears on their heads. It looked like a big brother with 2 younger brothers. The 2 big grizzly bears squatted behind them, and the family of 5 was happy. Unexpectedly, after a few days of peace, the little grizzly bear attacked the Malay bears. Su Ming went to see it a few days later. The 2 Malayan bears were obviously a little afraid of the little grizzly bear. When they saw the little grizzly bear, they kept hiding behind Su Ming, but there were no scars on their bodies. After checking the surveillance, Su Ming suddenly realized that the little grizzly bear was too bad. Not long after he left that day, the little grizzly bear wanted to beat the 2 guys. Being thin has its advantages. The 2 Malayan bears are very flexible, and they have a special skill that the grizzly bears do not have: they can climb trees. Most of the time in the jungle, Malayan bears live in trees. So every time the little grizzly bear made a move, the 2 Malayan bears ran away and climbed up the trees in the small woods in Bear Mountain. The little grizzly bear was waving his claws and howling to scare them, but the 2 Malayan bears refused to come down. Instead, they fell asleep in the tree, which made the little grizzly bear very helpless. But the little grizzly bear also has his own way. The main food of the grizzly bear is meat, a combination of meat and vegetables, while the Malayan bear is just the opposite, mainly vegetarian. Every time the keeper put out food, the little grizzly bear would eat the fruit first, and the Malayan bears didn't dare to grab it, so they could only watch pitifully from the tree. So after a period of time, the 2 Malayan bears didn't eat much. It was wrong from the beginning. Su Ming slapped his forehead after watching the surveillance video. This really can't be blamed on the grizzly bears. The beasts have a strong sense of territory. The grizzly bears have lived in the Bear Mountain for many years, and it's not something that can be changed in a short time. What's more, the grizzly bears who came are not the same kind of grizzly bears, but Malayan bears of the same animal order. The always domineering little grizzly bear certainly won't do it. When the panda Yingying first arrived, didn't they also fight? Even now, the little grizzly bear and the panda Yingying have made peace, and they are almost sworn brothers. The relationship is very harmonious, but the grizzly bears won't let Yingying and the little grizzly bear live in the Bear Mountain together. Not to mention the Malayan bears. A mistake almost starved the two Malayan bears to death. Fortunately, Malayan bears have many unique skills. They also have ways to deal with the little grizzly bears stealing their food. Whenever the little grizzly bears go back to the cage to sleep, the two little guys will quietly slip down from the tree, sticking their pubic hair out and digging around under the tree. Xiao Li, a keeper at Xiangshan, found many small holes in the grove. The holes are not big, about the thickness of an adult's forearm. It turns out that Malayan bears, like anteaters, will find ants to eat underground. The total length of their tongues is about the same as their body length. If they sit on a tree in the middle of the night, they will spit out like a hanged ghost. The two front paws will throw a small hole in the ground, and then continue to dig with their rough tongues, and they can find ants and earthworms and other creatures underground by smell. By chance, these two guys have recently helped Xiangshan get rid of several nests of ants. At this point, the grizzly bear and the Malayan bear family must not live together anymore. The Malayan bear's safety is a big problem, and the little grizzly bear will be trained to be a bully. You. Su Ming grabbed the little grizzly bear's ears and pointed at it and criticized it. The little grizzly bear opened its two innocent big eyes, covered its face with a bear paw, and had an expression of "I didn't do anything." "I'll criticize you next time," Su Ming slapped it on the forehead. The little grizzly bear fell straight back into the pool and floated on the water pretending to be dead. "You even learned to swim on your back." For the little grizzly bear's behavior of pretending to be stupid and dead and refusing to admit it, Su Ming really didn't have any good way. Animals are not quite the same as children. If a child is disobedient, beating him can solve more than 50% of the problems. If the little bear is disobedient, I really can't beat the little grizzly bear. Even if the little grizzly bear sticks out its butt to be spanked by me, it will hurt 80% of the time. Then let's just find a new home for the two sun bears. Follow me, don't fall behind on the road. Su Ming snapped his fingers, and two Malayan bears followed him out of the Bear Mountain, one on the left and one on the right. On the small road in the zoo, the tourists were shocked and thought that the bears had run out. The two Malayan bears were timid and were also frightened by the many tourists. They hurriedly followed Su Ming's legs with their short legs. Soon they arrived at the Malayan bear's new home. Their roommate this time was an anteater. The anteater was covered with a layer of fluff and dragged a long tail like a big brush. It looked at the two uninvited guests strangely. The two Malayan bears were also looking at the anteater. This guy looked like a big banana with long hair. His body, mouth, and furry tail were all in the shape of a banana with an arc. It looked very weird. The anteater in the zoo is a giant anteater, which weighs more than 20 kilograms, almost 50 kilograms. It is about the same size as a Malayan bear, but it is much slimmer. Its two front claws are very sharp and can easily dig a tunnel in the ground. The meat of the giant anteater is edible and is said to taste good, so the number of wild anteaters is decreasing, and it is not included in this release. The two Malayan bears of the giant anteater came together, sniffing each other, and suddenly, they stretched out their tongues at the same time and used their tongues to feel each other. It's so scary. Su Ming had goosebumps. The tongues of the three guys were long and thin. The shortest one was almost 50 centimeters, and the longest one was more than 1 meter. They licked each other, and their saliva was sticky all over their bodies. It looked very creepy. It felt like the tongue of the Black Mountain Demon in a Chinese ghost story. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 515. Unexpectedly, black bears and Malayan bears of the same order do not get along well, but Malayan bears and anteaters, who are not related at all, get along well. The cage of the anteater is also quite large, with a large mound of earth in the middle that is more than 1 person high. The mound of earth is the anteater's feeder. The main frame is wood, and the outside is made of clay in the shape of a mound. There are some large and small holes on the surface, and there are many interlaced small passages inside. A large group of ants will be put in at the bottom regularly. The anteater can usually lie on the mound feeder and stick its tongue into the hole. The ants will actively climb onto the wet big tongue, and then be rolled out and eaten with a squeak. The anteater has no shortage of food. It lay on the mound and ate for a while. The 2 Malayan bears also learned to eat like it. The 3 big guys lay on the surface of the mound, motionless, and used their tongues to fish for ants. There are many cases like gray wolf hyena, gray bear, and Malayan bear. The local native animals and the new outsiders will definitely not be able to get along immediately. Fortunately, under the suppression of Su Ming's mental power, the 2 sides can finally coexist peacefully. Time will solve this problem. As the 2 sides become more familiar with each other, they will naturally get along better over time. Compared with the animals in the zoo, the animals released into the wild live happily. Most of the animals released into the wild are active in the back mountain, and the Lure people can often meet them when patrolling the mountain. The Lure people used to live in Iraq, and hunting was one of their main sources of food. Now there is enough food, and the released animals have not been killed by humans, and they will hardly encounter major threats. Because of their life experience in the zoo, these animals are not afraid of people after being released into the wild. Tourists who go to Huyuxianju in the back mountain can often see various small animals in the nearby woods on the way. When they see tourists coming, these animals do not run away. Some even come up and curiously observe humans in turn. I don't know who is paying to see whom. There are suddenly many more traces of animals on the grass, in the woods, and beside the streams in the mountains and forests. The whole back mountain seems full of vitality. The era when you couldn't even see a wild rabbit is finally gone. Even in the zoo, when you are boating on the Shuahun Lake, you can often see various animals coming down from the mountains and drinking water by the lake. On the days when the zoo is open, you can often see people and animals in close contact, enjoying each other, and people and nature are integrated into one. The Lure people went to Ren Chen school and cram school in batches to attend classes, met many new friends, and sometimes took new friends to the back mountain to play. Similarly, releasing animals into the wild is not completely without problems. Half of the animals released into the wild are various birds, and there is no shortage of more ferocious guys like the Saker falcon. These guys need to survive and eat, and they naturally cannot do without hunting. Su Ming certainly won't interfere with normal hunting, and the food chain of nature cannot be destroyed. In fact, due to the spiritual power, the animals coming out of the zoo have a mysterious sense of familiarity with each other, just like acquaintances. Unless they are extremely hungry, they will not kill each other under normal circumstances. The back mountain is next to the Kinling Mountains, and there is no shortage of food. When the Lure people patrol the mountains, they will deliberately bring food to release. But there is an exception. The snake garden in the back mountain. The snake garden is not within the scope of the zoo, nor is it very close to the zoo park like Guyuxianju. The straight line distance from the edge of the park is more than half a kilometer, which is equivalent to an isolated enclave. The snakes in it are not recognizable to the animals in the zoo. A large group of carnivorous birds, many of which are particularly fond of eating snakes, discovered the snake garden. This is the end of the matter. There are too many snakes in the snake garden. The ground and the surrounding walls are all cement. These snakes are crowded together and can't run away. The whole snake garden has become a big food warehouse for birds. In just half a day, 45 poisonous snakes were killed. The Tyrannosaurus rex is the largest one in the snake garden and the only one that can enter and leave the snake garden freely. Sometimes it lives in the waterside lake, and sometimes it lives in the snake garden. It happened to be in the snake garden that day and caught up with this unfortunate thing. A large piece of scales on its head was pecked off by several owls and woodpeckers. Its intelligence is relatively high. It knows that this group of birds are also Su Ming's men, so it can only swim back to the zoo with a bloody big bald head to ask Su Ming for help. It's too miserable. There is a large bald spot on the forehead. Su Ming hurried to the back mountain and radiated his mental power with himself as the center of the circle, temporarily protecting the sky above the snake garden. While calling the engineering team to send someone to build a temporary roof for the snake garden, he bandaged the wound of the tyrant python. Bandaging wounds is not Su Ming's strong point, and he has a bit of obsessive-compulsive disorder. After wrapping the tyrant python's head with gauze for a few times, he looked left and right, and always felt that one side was wrapped more and the other side was wrapped less, so he wrapped the gauze a few more times, and looked again. It was still asymmetrical. After a round of bandaging, the tyrant python's big head became twice as thick, just like a wounded soldier coming down from the battlefield, with a thick white cloth wrapped on his head. Well, it looks much more comfortable this way. Su Ming finally tied a bow, touched his chin, and looked at his masterpiece with satisfaction. The tyrant python stared at the gauze bow, confused, and hid in the corner in shame. Since he had already gone deep into the back mountain, Su Ming thought about it and decided to go to Beiwa Valley to see the two queen bees. The location of Beiwa Valley is not just a few kilometers away from the zoo, but has really penetrated into the Kinling Mountains. When I went there for the first time, I asked Su Ming to carry me on his back and jump forward in the mountains like a big monkey. It took me half a day to walk back. There are no roads in the mountains, so driving is definitely not an option. Helicopters can go directly there, but Su Ming doesn't want others to know about the existence of Beiwa Valley for the time being. He spilled his mental power and found an eagle at the same time, letting it fly in the air and using the ability to attach souls. Not long after, he found the second senior brother. Since Tony banned him from interacting with the two horses last time, the second senior brother and the second pig have been quite lost. It's not a good feeling to have no friends. When they were found, they were following a group of sika deer. The sika deer probably thought that these two guys were too unhygienic, so they didn't pay much attention to them and lowered their heads to eat grass by themselves. The second pig was also very diligent in digging out the tree roots buried underground. Erden, stay here. Second senior brother, come here quickly. Second senior brother was conscripted by Su Ming, and he couldn't survive in the mountains without a mount. Second senior brother had a broad back. After Su Ming jumped on it, he lay on its back and pulled its big ears. Go, go, go. Head to Beiwa Valley. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 516. There are no tigers in the mountains, so monkeys are king. Even when there are tigers, a huge wild boar like the second brother is not afraid of tigers. On the contrary, if it encounters an ordinary tiger, it is probably the tiger that flees. The second brother ran wildly with Su Ming on his back, and when he reached the narrow canyon entrance at the outermost part of the 100 Flowers Valley, Su Ming turned over and got off the boar. As a mount, the second brother's own quality is impeccable. He runs fast, has great strength, and is obedient, but his equipment is not good. Next time I have a chance, I will tailor a set of saddles for the second brother and the second pig. Pig saddle? Wait for me here, don't run around. Su Ming patted the second brother's broad back and let it wander around by itself. Just don't run too far. He got off the pig and walked towards the 100 Flowers Valley. If you look down from the sky, the 100 Flowers Valley looks like a large depression on the ground, surrounded by cliffs, with only a narrow canyon as the entrance. If it were in ancient times, the terrain here would definitely be a 1-man block, 10-man block. Walking along the canyon, before entering the 100 Flowers Valley, I found something a little wrong. The so-called canyon is naturally surrounded by cliffs on both sides. The color of the cliffs on both sides in front is obviously wrong, a gray-black color, as if a layer of shell has grown. Suddenly, the mountain walls on both sides suddenly came to life. The gray shell instantly turned into countless small dots, like a flying butterfly, buzzing and rising into the air, forming a dark cloud that blocked the way forward. Mosquitoes. A large group of mosquitoes. Get out of the way, get out of the way, it's so disgusting to look at, goosebumps all over my body. More than 10 meters away, Su Ming felt itchy all over when he saw this group of mosquitoes, and quickly waved his hand and spread his mental power. Last time I went to the provincial capital, I brought back a large bottle of mosquitoes in a mineral water bottle. It was just a prank for fun, but mosquitoes are really not fun. In less than half a day, the novelty wore off, so I let them fly to Beiwa Valley and be with the bees. Mosquitoes have a short lifespan. I didn't expect this group of mosquitoes to survive until now. Not only are they alive, but the team seems to have expanded. The large black mass is many times more than when I brought them back. There are many mosquitoes in the mountains, so it's not surprising that they gather together. When Su Ming thought of the 2 queen bees annexing the territories of other bee colonies in Beiwa Valley, he couldn't help but laugh. What are these mosquitoes going to do? Are they also going to form a mosquito army in the mountains and become the king of all mosquitoes in Kinling Mountains? They are really ambitious. In their short lives, they want to make a great career. After receiving Su Ming's order, the mosquitoes dispersed and lay quietly on the mountain walls on both sides again. There are so many mosquitoes, one bite from each of them, they can suck a person into a mummy. Although Su Ming knew that these guys would not bite him, he was still a little nervous when he passed through the middle. But it's good this way. If ordinary tourists come here by accident and see so many mosquitoes, they will probably be scared away. I don't know what these mosquitoes rely on for survival. Do they suck the blood of nearby animals? Su Ming scratched his head. Surrounded by so many mosquitoes, his IQ was not enough. He rushed through the canyon and finally came to the 100 Flowers Valley. His eyes lit up. Flowers. So many flowers. The term sea of flowers is often used to describe the grand occasion of flowers blooming in a place. But when Su Ming saw the scene of the 100 Flowers Valley at this time, he realized that the so-called sea of flowers in other scenic spots he had seen before was simply weak. In the endless 100 Flowers Valley, there are flowers of various colors everywhere. Looking down from the hillside, it is like a large carpet of floral patterns stretching far into the distance. What is rare is that although the colors of these flowers are different, they do not look messy at all, but have a kind of patchwork beauty. In the flowers, bees can be seen everywhere flying around and collecting honey. There are no roads in the 100 Flowers Valley, so Su Ming has an illusion that if he takes a step out, he will fall into the sea of flowers. He even can't bear to move forward and is reluctant to step on the beautiful scenery in front of him. He is reluctant to step on it, but he still has to step on it. The nearest grove where the bee colony is located is more than 500 meters away from the entrance. Unless you have wings, you can fly over. There is an indescribable faint fragrance in the air. Su Ming is about to move forward, and suddenly, a dark cloud appears above the nearest woods in front of him. But this time he was not surprised, because he knew that it was one of the gathering places of bee colonies, and all the bees that flew out were bees. Without these hard-working little bees, there would not be so much honey and royal jelly for him to squander. He waded through a small path in the sea of flowers, and finally arrived at the grove surrounded by bees. Compared with the last time, there were more honeycombs hanging on the branches of the grove, just like a fruit forest, except that the fruits were all honeycombs, and some of these honeycombs were honey and some were bees. Behind the 100 Flowers Valley, there were several larger forests. From the perception of spiritual power, the number of bees in this forest alone was calculated to be 100,000. At present, even Su Ming himself could not figure out how many bees and wasps there were in the entire bee colony. The two queen bees lived in this forest. From a distance, they could see that the honeycombs they lived in were several times larger than when they left last time. Probably because they were too big and too heavy, they could not hang on the branches. After being moved, they were now like two huge bird nests, side by side on the tree canopy. As soon as I walked into the old tree, the fragrance I smelled before became stronger. Su Ming was slightly stunned. He initially thought that this fragrance was the fragrance of various flowers in the sea of flowers. Actually, it was right, it was the fragrance of flowers. But after entering the woods, this fragrance should not be so strong, it should be lighter than the sea of flowers outside, but now it is just the opposite. The fragrance in the woods is clearer. This fragrance is different from any perfume he has smelled before. Su Ming knows a lot of beautiful girls. Nangongyan alone usually has 4 or 5 high-end perfumes for different occasions, and any bottle is expensive. Ding Jing, Hong Fi Fei, and others also apply perfume on weekdays, and even mercenaries like Ludmila will use it when there is no mission. But compared with the fragrance he smelled now, those so-called international brand luxury perfumes are simply earthy and vulgar, just like the non-mainstream hair salon standing in front of the 7 Ferries. Su Ming stood under the tree, looking at the 2 big beehives above his head in confusion, his heart full of doubts. Could it be that this fragrance came from these 2 beehives? It's really strange. I've only seen bees make honey, but never heard of bees making perfume. And wasps. Perfume, is it poisonous? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 517. You smell like her perfume. Su Ming's mind was a little confused. He suddenly remembered the tune of this very magical song and subconsciously hummed along. His nose twitched a few times, and the smell became stronger. There was an indescribable feeling. The perfume sold on the market, no matter how high-end it is, inevitably has a chemical smell. If you apply too much, it will not only not have a pleasant fragrance but will be very suffocating. But the fragrance I smelled now was not like this. Although it was strong, it did not make people feel uncomfortable. What is going on? Come out, don't hide in the nest. Don't you ask me to come every day, I'm at the door of my house. Why are you two still hiding in the nest? You have to ask the 2 queen bees what the situation is. In this 100 Flowers Valley, these 2 are the bosses. Su Ming stood under the big tree, his hands rolled into a trumpet shape, and shouted loudly at the tree. The 2 honeycombs above were a bit scary. At first glance, they looked like 2 big sleeping bags. Su Ming estimated that if the honeycomb opening was a little bigger, he could curl up and get in. After calling out, the 2 beehives began to vibrate slightly one after another, as if something was about to crawl out of them. The 2 queen bees finally appeared in front of him. Oh my, big hum. Seeing these 2 familiar queen bees, Su Ming's eyes almost fell out, his mouth grew wide, and his expression was extremely weird. I didn't expect you to be queen bees like this. I haven't seen them for half a year, and these 2 sisters have grown amazingly. The last time I saw them, the 2 queen bees were only about the same size as newborn kittens and puppies. Even so, they are rare and even unheard of bees among bees. At this time, the body length of the 2 queen bees is at least more than half a meter. The round body is like a small aerial bomb, with a slender waist that can be grasped in one hand, and there are some ridiculous little wings on both sides of the body. It slowly flew down from the treetops and hovered in the air in front of Su Ming. The two queen bees have 4 pairs of compound eyes, and they look at Su Ming with big eyes. Not only has the body become larger, but also the appearance has changed significantly. The honey queen originally had some light dark stripes on her body, but now they have completely disappeared. Except for the legs and wings, most parts of the body surface are a light golden color similar to honey. At first glance, it looks like a bee made of pure gold, rich and noble. The body of the wasp queen is just the opposite. The entire body surface is mainly dark, especially the circles of patterns on the abdomen, which are shiny black. The black patterns on the wasp's body can most directly reflect the size of the toxicity. Seeing these patterns, Su Ming couldn't help but frowned. It is estimated that the wasp queen should have no problem poisoning an elephant alone now. It can't be called the wasp queen anymore, just call it the poison queen. After half a year, one has become a rich gold, and the other has become a black-bellied woman. The smell I smelled just now was emitted from the two queens. No. How can it fly again? Su Ming saw their 2 small wings fluttering at a high frequency, and then he suddenly remembered that the queen bee was too big and didn't need to collect honey, so she couldn't fly. These 2 guys not only grew bigger, but also had new skills. Buzz buzz. The 2 queen bees circled around Su Ming for a while, probably because their bodies were too heavy. Flying for a long time was also a big burden for them, and slowly landed on the grass on the ground. Su Ming also sat down and looked at the 2 carefully. In terms of size, the queen bee is actually a little smaller, and the poison queen came later. Anyway, she is bigger. Animals that have been exposed to spiritual power will have a certain mutation, stronger, smarter, and more human, but this mutation is generally not too obvious, and it is within the acceptable range for ordinary people. However, the mutation of these 2 queen bees is very exaggerated. Su Ming felt a little scary when he saw the bees the size of mineral water bottles. Now that they have grown so big, ordinary people will probably piss on the spot. If this trend continues, in a few years, won't these 2 guys become about the same size as tigers? What is this? Opposite sex? The changes in body size are fine, but the changes in mental character are also speechless. Other animals are getting smarter, but they still retain the characteristics of their species. For example, wolves are very arrogant, tigers are very domineering, and pandas are very stupid. They will not become like humans just because they have more contact with spiritual power. These 2 queen bees are developing in the direction of humanization. At the beginning, when there was no poison queen, the honey queen obviously developed a sense of dependence on human women, and even had the idea of competing for hegemony, establishing an organized gang to annex other bee colonies in Beiwa Valley. Now, the 2 queen bees clearly have a very resentful mood. As for why they are resentful, everyone knows it tacitly. They are unhappy because they haven't been visited for so long. If this continues, will they start to love and hate each other? Su Ming slapped his forehead in frustration. The plot was completely wrong. Half of the animals in the zoo were female, and many were single. There were tigresses, lionesses, monkeys, sows. Those animals had never been like this before. Why did these 2 queen bees, who rarely met, become like resentful women? It was probably because of the food. The food of these 2 guys was royal jelly, and royal jelly had the effect of improving mental strength, which might have some strange side effects on animals. 2 queens, 1 person, and 3 guys sat there staring at each other for a while. No one spoke first, and the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Fortunately, Su Ming was very experienced in dealing with creatures of the opposite sex. He coughed and used his skills to change the subject. What's the matter with the fragrance on you two? It smells so good. Su Ming said as he picked up the honey queen and smelled it. Now that they are both big, it is definitely not possible to hold them in the palm of your hand. He can only hold them in his arms. Seeing Su Ming holding the honey queen, the poison queen was not satisfied. A black, long, and frighteningly sharp stinger suddenly emerged from the back of her body. She shook it at Su Ming as a protest, and looked at him coldly with her compound eyes. The honey queen was not to be outdone. She opened her mouth, and there were actually two jaws that looked very sharp, like a sickle, snapping. Well, the two of them are getting further and further on the road to the monster. If you keep making trouble, I'll leave. Su Ming was completely speechless, glared at them fiercely, held the honey queen in his right hand, and then held the poison queen in his left hand, and also sniffed them. The fragrance came from the two of them. If you smell it carefully, there are some subtle differences in the smell. Dividing line. I have been too busy with work recently, so I have adjusted the update time. Starting from tomorrow, it will be updated at 8 p.m. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 518. In general, the two queen bees are like two large sachets, both of which exude a refreshing fragrance. But if you smell it carefully, the smell of the honey queen is sweet, while the smell of the poison queen is charming. If you use the popular perfumes on the market as an analogy, one is Chanel Pink Chance and the other is Dior Red Poison. Nangongyan usually likes to use the former, and Hong Fifei occasionally uses something similar when she is not cooking. When she met Ding Jing several times, she used the latter. Perfume is one of the must-haves for women. Several clerks in the office and nurses in the clinic often exude various perfumes. Su Ming's nose was trained in this environment. His appreciation of perfume has barely reached the level of an ordinary girl, and he is a semi-professional. The smell of the two queen bees is not worse than that of branded perfumes. It is not surprising to have such a fragrance. There are all kinds of flowers everywhere in the 100 Flowers Valley, and the fragrance is rich. Even if a person lives here for a long time, he will be stained with fragrance. Besides, these two queen bees feed on the royal jelly, the essence of hundreds of flowers. It is not surprising that they have produced a strange fragrance after eating it for a long time. This can also explain why this fragrance is much better than the perfumes available on the market. The perfumes on the market are produced with one or several flowers as the main raw materials and chemical ingredients added, while the fragrance of the two queen bees is pure natural and pollution-free, perfectly blending the smell of hundreds of flowers. Of course, it is not comparable to ordinary perfumes. Su Ming came to the 100 Flowers Valley. In addition to visiting them, there is an additional purpose. 200 lure people are about to move into the back mountain. In addition to taking 1 or 2 days a week to learn languages and be foreign teachers, most of the rest of the time, these lure people have nothing to do. A small number of them are assigned to work in the security department of the Reservoir Fishery Company and the zoo, and most of them are in a state of idleness. Patrolling the mountain is not a job for them, it is the same as taking a walk. When in Iraq, the Love people had to hunt, join the army, make various daily necessities, set up stalls in the city to make money, and participate in military training to guard against the attacks of IS and Kurds, and be careful not to be used as cannon fodder by the government army. In short, they lived a busy and stressful life. After arriving in Yangchuan City, food, clothing, housing, and transportation were temporarily provided by Daowen Community Residence Committee, and the life of the Love people suddenly became extremely leisurely. Not working sounds like a very pleasant thing, but it is not. If you always have nothing to do, you will be useless, and they are all young and energetic guys. It is easy to cause trouble if you have nowhere to vent your energy. So Su Ming plans to let the Love people open up a piece of land in the back mountain and do planting. In addition to morels, the two wild boars have recently dug out a lot of valuable crops in the mountains. Fungus, young ginseng, Ganoderma mushrooms, etc. can all be tried. In addition, there is a lot of land in the mountains, and opening up an orchard is also a good choice, which can supply raw materials to wineries and restaurants, and can also sell fresh fruits in the market. If the zoo develops into a comprehensive tourist attraction in the future, The orchard will also be a sight. Even if it is not for making money, it is safer to grow some pure natural fruits to eat than to buy them from the market. Who knows how the fruits in supermarkets are made these days? Last time Nangong bought 2 lemons, they looked bright in color, but Su Ming felt something was wrong. How could lemons be as bright as glass balls? And they felt smooth to the touch. In the end, he used a small knife to scrape off a layer of wax on the surface of the lemon. If he had given it an extra wick, it could have been made into a small candle. Anyway, every time he went back to Suntown, the fruits, grains, pork, and even water he ate tasted different from those in the city. To put it a little hypocritically, the white rice porridge in the mountains is more fragrant than the ones cooked in the city. So he found some free time and ordered a batch of fruit trees and fruit seedlings, all of which were common fruits: apples, pears, peaches, watermelons, bayberries, and large melons, about a dozen species, enough to plant hundreds of acres of land. It is not technically difficult to let the Lure people engage in gardening. Liang Shi can just invite an expert from the Academy of Agricultural Sciences to give guidance. Lao He from the Gardening Bureau can also help. Su Ming plans to take a group of bees back to spread pollen. There are also wild bees in the back mountain, but in comparison, the honey in the 100 Flowers Valley is smarter and is still our own people. Come on, take me around the 100 Flowers Valley, see your men, and select a group of capable people for me. Su Ming snapped his fingers, and the 2 queen bees took off with a buzz, leading the way in front and leaving the woods. The area of 100 Flowers Valley is not small. In addition to the large flower sea in the center, there is a forest in the deepest part. It was the station of the former bee coalition army. Now it has become a large bee swarm and honey storage. There is actually a small waterfall behind the woods. The water flows down from the cliff after several turns, forming a small pool of about 100 square meters below, which should be the source of the water flow in the 100 Flowers Valley. The water pool was crystal clear, the deepest part was only up to Su Ming's chest, and the shallow water around it was only up to the bend of his calf. Some small silverfish swam happily in the water. This kind of small silverfish was a specialty of the mountains. It didn't grow big, and few people ate it. It mainly lived on plankton in the water, which played a role in purifying the water source. While inspecting the territory, he also counted the current development of the bee colony. There are about 3 tons of honey and more than 100 kilograms of royal jelly accumulated in the 100 Flowers Valley. If they are used to build a factory for sales, they will definitely not be used. Su Ming has no idea in this regard. In addition to eating honey and royal jelly himself, they must be kept for the bee colony to survive the winter. If they are sold, they will not make much money, which is meaningless. Last time, the 2 queen bees were bored and reorganized. There are a lot of bees, divided into 35 small tribes. Each small tribe is led by a bee with higher intelligence, but it does not have its own queen bee. The total number is not even clear for the 2 queen bees. Su Ming saw a medium-sized tribe. It is estimated that this tribe must have tens of thousands of bees. Dozens of tribes together are definitely millions of bees. Wasps are combat troops. They only consume but do not produce honey, so the number is deliberately controlled. There are 10 teams in total, each responsible for protecting the 2 queen bees, patrolling in the 100 Flower Valley, and dealing with other threatening animals. Each team has thousands to tens of thousands of wasps, and together, there are about 70,000 to 80,000 wasps. As long as there is no human armed force, the 100 Flower Valley is 100% safe. The Queen Honey allocated a small tribe settled on the edge of the 100 Flower Valley to Su Ming to take away, to be used for honey dissemination in the orchard, and to establish a midway contact point between the zoo and the 100 Flower Valley. Seeing that it was getting late, he stayed in the 100 Flower Valley for one night, talked about life and ideals with the 2 queen bees, and rode a wild boar back to the zoo early the next morning. After all the calculations, I forgot an important thing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 519. After returning to the zoo, he passed by several employees along the way. They all looked at him with a strange smile, which made Su Ming confused. When passing by Tingfeng Pavilion, Nangong Huang squatted at the gate waiting for dinner. Seeing Su Ming coming, he nodded at the gate. It seems that Ding Niu and Hong Fei are chatting about life and ideals in there again. These two girls really regard Tingfeng Pavilion as a dating place? However, the door of Tingfeng Pavilion is half closed, and it seems that the conversation is not very in-depth. I was hungry, so I pushed the door and prepared to go in. Brother-in-law, you just go in like this. Nangong Huang looked at Su Ming strangely. Ah! How do I get in? Yelling for rounds, Su Ming was puzzled. Why did everyone he met today seem a little strange? He went to the back mountain. Did the people in the zoo have a problem with their brains? As they were talking, they had already walked in. They happened to meet Hong Fei coming out of the kitchen with a plate of bamboo shoots and meat. Ding Jing followed from behind, wearing a white apron around her waist. It seemed that she had just helped in the kitchen. You came just in time. How is the food? We have made a few new dishes, wild boar meat and bamboo shoots, all of which you got from Suntown. Ding Jing said as she set the dishes on the table. When she passed by Su Ming, she suddenly stopped, stared at him up and down for a few times, and the corners of her mouth gradually raised a playful arc. What are you looking at? Su Ming was frightened. Ding Jing wiped her hands on her apron and said with a smile, nothing. She continued to set the table, lowered her head and said lightly, Hong Fei's father will come to see his daughter next month at the latest. You should pay attention then. Pay attention to what? Su Ming was even more puzzled. I am upright, with a righteous spirit and clean hands. What is there to pay attention to? After coughing, he turned around and called out to the outside, Nangong Huang, come in and eat. Oh, I'm here. Nangong Huang strode in with a cigarette in his mouth, sat down at the table, grabbed the chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat with a look of eagerness, and his mouth was full of oil. Woo, fragrant, so fragrant. Nangong Huang's handsome face was squeezed together, and he praised the meat indistinctly. Eat slowly, today is all meat. Hong Fei brought up 2 more plates from the back, 1 plate of braised pig's trotters, and 1 plate of pig's head meat mixed with shepherd's purse. The wild boar breeding in Suntown has begun to show results. The first batch of wild boars has grown to the size of being able to be served on the table. 2 were specially sent to the zoo for Su Ming to try first. Today's table of dishes is all wild boar meat, fried, steamed, deep fried, cold, wild radish and pork meatballs, iron plate wild boar fillet, deep fried pork chops, chestnut roasted wild boar, plus pig stomach mushroom soup, and a very strange charcoal roasted sow's trotter. In addition to wild boar meat, the remaining side dishes, chestnuts, shepherd's purse, wild radish, bamboo shoots, etc. are all mountain products collected by the villagers of Suntown. For a chef of Hong Fei's level, the best is actually home-cooked dishes. It is a real test of skill to be able to make the most ordinary dishes into extraordinary flavors. Putting aside Hong Fei's cooking skills, wild boar meat is more fragrant than ordinary domestic pigs, and the meat is more chewy. The nutritional value cannot be tasted, and the taste is very good, without the greasy feeling of domestic pigs. Hong Fei, a girl, ate a small trotter. While eating and chatting, I realized that Su Ming and Nangong Huang had thought wrongly. Ding Jing and Hong Fei often met in Tingfeng Pavilion during this period. It was not that they regarded this place as a secret den. Seeing that Tingfeng Pavilion was about to open, the two of them were studying the recipes and had already come up with a large recipe with 78 hot and cold dishes, which was enough to meet the needs of the restaurant in the future. In addition, next month, after Hongbo handles the follow-up matters of Hongjiake, he will come to the zoo to inspect the working environment of his children on site. Su Ming knew that Ding Jing said this to Nangong Huang. What a bullshit working environment, just to inspect his fake boyfriend. Hong Fei looked at Su Ming with a little worry, and whispered, "When the time comes, can you take a shower and change into a new set of clothes?" Ah, Su Ming was even more confused. What did I do? Does it look dirty? I don't understand at all. I staggered back to the office and took a nap on the big sofa. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the office door was pushed open, and Nangong Yan walked in from outside wearing super short hot pants. "Why are you calling me here in a hurry?" "I'm so hot, so hot." Nangong Yan threw her bag on the table as soon as she entered the door, and took a bottle of iced cola from the small refrigerator and drank it. "Drink less cold drinks, or you will have a stomachache." Su Ming yawned and got up. Yes, then drink it." Nangong Yan handed the remaining half bottle of Coke to Su Ming. Su Ming walked to her side, and as soon as he took the Coke, Nangong Yan's face changed and her eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" Su Ming shrugged and drank the remaining half bottle. Nangong Yan looked puzzled, and came over like a kitten, sniffing at his clothes. As she sniffed, she suddenly sneered. "Why are you laughing like that?" "It's scary," Su Ming said fearfully. "The perfume is very high-end. Which brand is new? When will you give me a bottle?" Nangong Yan folded her arms and continued to sneer. Huh. At this moment, Su Ming suddenly realized that it was no wonder that everyone along the way was so weird. "I stayed in Beiwa Valley for a day yesterday, and I also hugged 2 queen bees. My body was covered with fragrance. I felt sensitive to the scent at first, but soon I got used to it, just like a smoker cannot smell the smoke on his body, and a person who wears perfume will also ignore it. Of course, ordinary employees dare not say anything when they smell it." Nangong Huang and Hong Fei probably thought that he was looking for a woman outside, and they were embarrassed to mention it in person. Nangong Yan had no worries. Careless, too careless. This is a lie. Su Ming is also a man who has been in battle for a long time. Of course, he knows that such a strong smell on his body must not be as simple as ordinary contact in the eyes of ordinary people. It is impossible without holding him in his arms for more than half an hour. "I tell you, this is an accident." Su Ming quickly took out a small wooden bottle that looked a bit simple from his arms. "I called you here specifically to give you perfume. Don't fool me. What kind of perfume is this? I have never seen it before, and it is in a broken bottle." Nangong Yan took the wooden bottle in confusion and pulled out the wooden stopper. Suddenly a sweet fragrance floated out from it. "Wow, it smells so good. Where did you buy it?" Nangong Yan's eyes lit up. "This is of course not bought." Before leaving the 100 Flowers Valley, the 2 queen bees took him to a small forest where the smallest bee tribe lived. He realized that he had guessed wrong before. The fragrance of the 2 queen bees was not brought by eating royal jelly all year round. They were so bored in the 100 Flowers Valley that they actually made a perfume. The most abundant thing in the 100 Flowers Valley is a variety of flowers. When flowers bloom, they naturally wither, and there are falling spots everywhere. The work of this small tribe of less than 10,000 bees is to collect various petals, combine them with the dew on the petals, and put them in several large tree holes. It is somewhat similar to the fermentation process of monkey wine, and finally it becomes perfume. Trust. What is the most important thing between people? Trust. Su Ming turned the tables in a second, and educated Nangong Yan with his hands on his waist. Nangong Yan had already put some perfume on her wrists and rubbed them together. "What brand is it? I've never smelled anything like it." "Don't worry about the brand. Just tell me how it is." Give me some professional advice, Su Ming said. I think. Nangongyan rubbed the perfume on her hand to let the smell spread as soon as possible. Before she finished her sentence, her emphasis suddenly changed. She made a soft and sticky humming sound from her nose, which sounded like she was doing something. Why are you moaning? Su Ming was stunned. Nangongyan raised her head, her cheeks slightly red, her big eyes were watery, and she was flashing with animal light. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 520. Without warning, a big fight broke out in the office. Nangong's sudden kiss caught Su Ming off guard, and he was pushed onto the sofa and ravaged. During the whole process, Nangong was like a little female leopard, extremely ferocious, attacking and attacking again. Afterwards, Nangongyan was a little annoyed. The reason for the annoyance was not because of the sudden shot, nor because Nangongyan was more active in this shot and was angry. Speaking of it, young men and women fall in love, and it is just the joy of the boudoir. It is neither illegal nor immoral. Nangongyan is not a hypocritical person. Since the two of them had their first time at the Disney Hotel, they have been more open in this regard. But this time was different. Nangongyan could feel that she suddenly had a flame rising up at that time, and her whole mind was unclear, and her mind was full of that thing. As an adult, she knew it after thinking about it, and she must have been drugged. She was fine all the way to the zoo, only after entering the office, she drank a bottle of Coke and used the perfume given by Su Ming. Su Ming also drank the Coke and reminded her not to drink too much, so the only possibility was the perfume. Everyone has dignity, especially girls should respect themselves. Although she has officially established a relationship with Su Ming and has had many substantive contacts, the premise is that she is willing. This time the nature is completely different. Even between lovers, you can't do this, which is a great disrespect for each other. Nangongyan and Su Ming are in love, not each other's dolls. Fortunately, Nangongyan and Su Ming know each other better. Nangongyan knows very well who Su Ming is. Although he is a little impatient, he never does anything despicable. It is probably that he wanted to give her perfume with good intentions, but he bought it with ingredients. Wait, is it this perfume that caused it? Su Ming was very confused. He still had high expectations for this honey perfume. There were not many perfumes that could catch Nangongyan's eye. Since even she said it was good, it meant that the quality of the honey perfume was indeed very high, at least on the same level as those international brands. Perfume is a luxury and expensive. One bottle of high-end perfume can buy hundreds of bottles of honey. Selling honey is not worthwhile, but selling perfume is profitable. There are plenty of bees and flowers in the 100 Flowers Valley, and they can be mass-produced. But if these perfumes have such side effects, then why produce them? Once they enter the market, you can just wait to get cleaned up and go to jail. The Friends of the Russian People and the deputies to the National People's Congress are reselling aphrodisiacs on a large scale for profit. This is a disgrace to the entire Eastern world. The 76th Airborne Division is expected to come down from the sky and shoot you. Seeing Su Ming's strange expression, Nangongyan opened her eyes wide and said in surprise, "Aren't you going to let me try again?" He, Su Ming said with a smile, "You should apply less this time. Besides, even if it is really a problem with the perfume, it won't be a bargain for others anyway." "You wish?" Nangongyan glared. She said so, but she was also very curious in her heart. She took the perfume bottle, carefully dipped a little with a small cotton swab, and touched her wrist. "How is it? Do you feel it?" Su Ming stared at her and asked. Nangongyan rubbed her hands back and forth alternately. As the fragrance gradually spread, she never transformed again and said, "Hey, it seems that this time." "It's okay." Su Ming was slightly happy, but a little disappointed. You go and draw the curtains and lock the door." Nangongyan's eyes began to drip again, biting her lips and said hatefully. Well, I'm still hit. Fight. 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 That afternoon, the curtains in the director's office were opened and closed, closed and opened again, tossing back and forth for several hours, until after 8 o'clock in the evening, when it was completely dark, and finally the lights were turned on, and the battle came to an end. Nangongyan was completely limp, like a mermaid who had just turned into a human, with 2 long legs limply draped over the sofa, soft as if boneless. Su Ming's chest was covered with blood-red scratches. In the 25-degree air-conditioned room, he was sweating profusely, panting, and sitting on the side with his bare chest drinking water. You did it on purpose. Nangongyan was really exhausted, and hooked her finger at Su Ming. Su Ming got up and poured her a glass of warm water and handed it to her. The battle this afternoon was initially to prove whether the perfume had any side effects, but after trying it out, the nature changed. The two of them took the initiative to use the perfume, and most of the bottle of perfume was almost empty. Of course, the original purpose was perfectly achieved. It was the perfume that caused the trouble. The side effects of honey perfume are terrifying. As long as you apply it in the normal way, even if you only apply a little bit, you will definitely be affected. The difference in the amount of use is whether you can stay conscious. According to the normal one-time amount used by adult women, basically there is nothing else in your mind, only fighting, reducing the amount to half. You can barely stay conscious, but reason cannot control the body. Only when the amount is less than a quarter, reason can prevail. But as long as the perfume is integrated into the skin, it will inevitably arouse a very serious physiological reaction, even if the amount is small. In addition, it has been proven that this thing works on both men and women, and it also works on men. The only difference is that men are very resistant, and the amount must be several times that of women. Now, the perfume business is completely in vain. Where did you get this thing from? Nangongyan held the almost empty perfume bottle and said sadly, it would be great if there were no side effects. Ahem, a friend gave it to me, saying it was a new product. Su Ming told Nangong in a single sentence. Did he want to tell Nangong that it was brewed by a swarm of bees? Or was it studied by 2 queen bees? Having said that, it seems that the 2 queen bees are immune to the side effects of perfume, but why do they want to study perfume with such side effects? Was it intentional or an accident? This is a very scary thing to think about, so I can't think too much about it. There are too many raw materials for making perfume, maybe because there are some kind or several flowers in it, which have aphrodisiac effects, and the 2 queen bees themselves didn't notice it. In any case, the first step in building a luxury goods empire was a mistake, and the plan to produce perfume was ruined. What are you thinking about? Nangongyan's voice came from the side. I'm thinking about other ways to make some money as soon as possible, Su Ming said. I'm going to buy the zoo. Nangongyan knew that this was Su Ming's long-cherished wish, so she helped give him an idea and said, that's a lot of money. Otherwise, if you go betting on horse racing again, you'd be so lucky. Betting on horse racing. Su Ming thought, if he can't go to Xiangjiang, should he go abroad, to England? I won 40 million in Xiangjiang, and the jockey club sent someone to gently persuade. Will the British watch helplessly as an outsider takes away hundreds of millions?